name is Sonia Grine. This is officially the first podcast for what I've been doing at my church, teaching in a class. We call the class Becoming Who You Are. It's based on a book by Dutch Sheets called Becoming Who You Are. Dutch is spelled D-U-T-C-H and Sheets is S-H-E-E-T-S in case anyone wants to buy it. This first podcast is really just going to be me discussing my testimony and how I came about to this and why it's important because, really this teaching that he did is kind of old. He did an audio recording of it in 1991, I think it was, and then he put out a book in, I believe it's 2006. I've loaned my book out, so I don't even have the book right now, but what I would like to do is just give you guys my testimony and just kind of a little outline of how things are going to go for the first 10 podcasts or so. And then after that, I'm going to start interviewing people who've taken my class, who've applied these principles, and that we can talk about how they've gained freedom. But at first, I want to give you my testimony and give you a little insight to what God has done in my life by applying these biblical principles. And I say these are just biblical principles. Dutch Sheets put them in a nice, neat little package that was easy to understand. The book is very easy to read. But it's just biblical principles. Anyone can find these principles, being Holy Spirit led. You could find these principles yourself. It might take you a bit longer. It might not be wrapped up in a nice little package like this is. I've taught this for several years now, so I've kind of made it my own and added some things to it. But I want to give Dutch Sheets credit. I also want to give credit to the book, The Spiritual Man. It is the same principles, just Dutch Sheets puts them in a more general, easier way to read them than it was in the book, The Spiritual Man. But either is a great reference to have someone else tell you the things that I'm going to tell you for, I guess it would be podcasts 2 through 11. If things go the way I expect them to. This is my first time doing this. I'll be honest, I'm not an expert. I don't know what I'm doing. I am using my church's recording studio, which I want to give credit to them, Remembrance Records. I really don't know what I'm doing as far as editing goes. This is not going to be a professional, polished podcast like you see all over the internet or all over social media. It's my first go around and I'm sure it's going to get better as I go. I have never done this, also not in front of a live class. And when you're in front of a live class, your class is always a little different each time because it depends on the people that are in your class. And you're drawn on or pulled on by who's there to teach what they need to hear. So it's a little more difficult this way. So give me some grace and mercy as I begin this adventure. And let me just, I guess, get started trying to explain things. Now, I do have to put my readers on because I am old and I need to be able to see what I'm going to read. And unfortunately, I am going to have to look down from time or two to know what I'm talking about, just because, like I said, this is my first time doing this. Plus, there is just a lot of biblical things I'm going to give throughout as we go, where I will need to reference what's down on the paper, because it's just, I do know it all by heart, but I want to make sure I say it correctly because I don't need the internet posse of biblical Christians out here trying to correct me. I am not. That's another thing we want to say when I'm saying I'm not an expert. I am not the best theologian on the planet. I do not necessarily know everything exactly biblically accurate. I'm still growing and learning myself. I will obviously am humble enough to take correction when it's needed. So that's not an issue, but I just don't want to be attacked. So first of all, a little bit about my testimony. So some things that I was struggling with, and it's going to get personal, and I am going to let you know up front that I am a crier. And even though God has very much so delivered me from these, what we're going to call traumas or strongholds, He has very much healed my heart of these things. A lot of times when I'm talking about these things, I think of the people who need to hear it, and I'm moved emotionally because my heart really, really, really reaches out to, see, I'm getting emotional right now because I just know that there's people that really need what is taught in these two books, this class, however you want to word it. I know people who need these biblical principles because they are desperate for freedom. And somewhere in the middle of being desperate for freedom, I became desperate for God. And that's what I hope to pass along. And that's what I hope you hear from my heart. So I actually was given this curriculum by my pastor. Her name is Lori Peterson. And I had went to her because I was very much so suffering many symptoms of many things that happened in my past, in my childhood, and even my adult past. This started to turn around for me 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years ago now. We're just a few months shy of 5 years since God began turning my life around with these biblical principles. But when I went to her, I had been told by the doctor for the second time that if I didn't quit smoking cigarettes and lose weight, I was not going to be here in 3 years. I was diagnosed with a heart-lung condition, and I'm not here to say that smoking cigarettes or being overweight is a sin. I'm here to say that the reason why I couldn't quit those things is because every time a crisis happened, which in my life they were happening all the time, I would immediately return to those things. And what I needed was a complete freedom, a complete healing, a way to not return to those crutches that I was using to keep me and get me through life. Because I couldn't emotionally handle what I was given. So I had went to her and said, I need help. And to be completely honest, wasn't completely honest with her at the time. Of course, she knows this now. But to be completely honest, I needed to also quit doing drugs and drinking. And the main reason why I was still doing drugs and drinking is because of things that happened to me in my past. I was not able to have sex unless I was loaded, unless I was drunk or high, and under the influence of something, some kind, somehow, some way. That was the only way I could relax enough to have sex. And I was married at the time, so having sex was necessary. Now, the reason why I was having such a struggle with that, and this is where we'll get into some things about my childhood, and I never know which to tell first, how I came about getting this curriculum and how I came about getting these principles, or, how I became me, how I became such a person that had such problems that I couldn't stop doing those things because I needed healed. I needed healed spiritually, I needed healed emotionally, and physically. And I became so desperate for that, I was willing to do anything. So I had begun counseling for I don't know how many upteenth time in my life. And the solution they were offering me was, I can't ever remember if it's EMDR or EDMR, but either way, this therapy that means, wait a minute, I'll figure it out, eye desensitization, so it's EDMR, eye desensitization, whatever it stands for, therapy. I'm terrible about that. And it scared me. It really scared me. I'm also not here to debate whether that's a good therapy or not. I know it is very effective with veterans. I know that scientifically they have had a lot of success with it. So I'm not here to debate whether that's okay or not. I'm talking about what was okay for me. And for me, I was told I would have 3 to 8 sessions per trauma. And every 3 to 8 sessions that we did per trauma, I could have a nervous breakdown and be hospitalized. And that meant I could be hospitalized every other month. And let's face it, with the amount of trauma that was in my life, I would be doing this till the rest of my life before I would be free from all of them. And I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not saying I've had the worst life as anyone either. There's many, many people out there that have had way worse life than me. I'm just being honest though, and the facts are, if I'd continued doing that, it would have taken many years. And having a nervous breakdown every other month for many years didn't sound like something I wanted to do. It scared me. It terrified me. So I went to my pastor and I said, I've never been free from these things, and I really want to be free. And she hadn't heard of the therapy, but I gave her all my notes on it because I had done quite a bit of research. I'd even talked to a couple people who've done it, and it was very effective for them. But it just scared me. And I mean, that's nothing new. Everything scared me. So she said, let me pray about this. So that was the Wednesday night. And by Sunday morning, she came marching up to me and handed me, she's so old school and old fashioned. She handed me some CDs, and I know you guys are going to see it backwards, but I'm going to show it to you anyways. And yes, it has had a lot of views. So I have the thing duct taped. This is pathetic, but everyone calls me the duct tape queen. So you might as well know it now. She handed me the workbook and CDs of Dutch Sheets teaching this when it was recorded back in 1991. And at that time, they were still reproducing the workbooks. They're not now. They're not producing the workbooks, but he does have a book that is called Becoming Who You Are. So anyway, she handed that to me, and she said, spend an hour a day listening to this and follow through with the workbook, which we call it a workbook, but it's really not a workbook. It's really a outline. It's really for you to take notes. I filled up a lot of the white space in my workbook because I am a little over the top sometimes. Just a little though. Don't ask anyone who knows me. They would say a lot. But anyways, so I was desperate for freedom. So I had gotten to the place where I was having nightmares continuously. I was very overweight. I was on 22 different medications per day. I was smoking cigarettes, drinking, doing drugs, and obviously had some sort of sexual dysfunction because of what had happened to me. So I was not in a good place mentally, and I was not in a good marriage, and I was not doing well in any way, shape, or form. Every day was a fight to keep my head above water. I was suicidal, and an emotional, over-the-top emotions that I could not rein in and had no control over. Now, how did I get to this place? How did I get to a place where everything was out of control? Okay, so let's just start at the beginning, okay? Before I was even born, I didn't know who my father was, and my mom lied to me several times about who my father was. And so that began the mess of my childhood. My mother was very neglectful. And by neglectful, I mean emotionally neglectful, physically neglectful. I was 4 years old, taking care of my 2-year-old sister. I was the one who bathed her, which wasn't very often because I didn't understand all those things as a very young child. I was the one who made sure she got a little bit of something to eat every day. I was the one who, when we were outside playing, I took care of her and watched her. And, I wasn't the greatest at it. I was a child, so my sister's no longer here. As a matter of fact, the name Colleen's Cry is named after my sister. And she suffered, the reason why I named it Colleen's Cry is because she suffered the same abuse I suffered I met the Lord right before I turned 21, and my sister didn't meet the Lord until about a year and a half before she passed. Our lives were vastly different, and even though I wasn't set free completely and delivered from these strongholds, and my path was very rough until almost 5 years ago, her path was exponentially worse than mine because she did not have God in her life. So I call this podcast Colleen's Cry because I feel the difference between her life and mine, and that would be her cry. Her cry would be that no one would live a life the way she lived, that no one would be that overcome by their strongholds and their traumas, that they would have to live a life that way, that they would be able to come to at least the same amount of freedom I've came to. I would like you to, everyone listening, to by far surpass me in their freedom and their relationship with the Lord. Another thing that was happening as we were children is our mom was very much on drugs, and we only saw who I thought was her father at the time, was actually found out later as both our fathers. We only saw him every other weekend, and that was the only time we had a little bit of normalcy, and that's basically not even 2 full days if you're picked up Friday evening and dropped back Sunday afternoon. And there were a lot of times it wasn't always every other weekend because he lived 2.5 hours away. So we didn't always get that break as often as we needed it or should have, and we shouldn't have been with her. We should have been able to be with our dad full time, but things just didn't work out that way. The courts were not as willing to give children to a father back then. That was a long time ago. We were, like I was saying, we were very neglected. We were the kids who smelled in school. We didn't know how to brush our teeth. We didn't know how to use the restroom correctly. We weren't clean. We didn't have good hygiene. And then to top it all off, our mom had many different men in and out of the house continuously, and many of those men abused me and my sister and I. They either sexually abused us or they physically abused us. And I mean, too many times to count that this happened by many different men. Just because there were so many drugs and alcohol involved in her life, it just brought in the wrong kind of men. The other thing that was happening is the weekends we didn't go to my dad's, we were shipped off to our grandparents. And our grandfather, he began molesting me when I was a baby and didn't stop till I was about 11. He molested all of the grandchildren that I know of. And now I know he also molested his children, which if he molested his children, which would be my mom, my aunt, and my uncle, which my mom now has dementia and she doesn't know who anyone is. She's completely gone. And my aunt and uncle are both passed away. But they were molested as well. I'm not sure why, if they were molested, they would then leave their children with the man that molested them, but nonetheless, that's what happened. And so not only did I have these very traumatic encounters of sexual abuse with my mom's boyfriends, or whatever they were, friends with benefits, I also had repeated sexual abuse with my grandfather, and I was the oldest grandchild, so I received the brunt of it. That was okay with me. I still to this day will take pain for other people. Part of why God wants me doing this is because I have a passion for it and have a passion for other people's pain. Sorry, here's what I'm talking about. I'm getting emotional because I'm thinking about the people who may listen to this, and I'm thinking about the pain they may be in when they hear these things. And it probably seems strange that I can talk about it so matter-of-factly, the abuse that I endured, but I can talk about it matter-of-factly because I am healed from it. And I'm all the way healed. You know, we're going to learn a thing that there's a difference between just being free and being free indeed. And we're also going to learn that there's a point in time where you get a knowledge of the truth, and you do feel incredible freedom in those moments. But what I'm talking about is all the way 100-fold, 100% complete freedom, free indeed, like the Bible says you can be. And why isn't this happening the moment we get saved? It should be, but it isn't. And that's because there's some things that has to happen. And I don't want to get into all of that until I get into teaching you the class and laying the proper foundation that needs to happen for that. So let's just stick with my testimony. And because of this sexual abuse, you know, there were many symptoms of this in my life. I never had a good dream. I can't remember good dream until after I began this class and I had my first good dream. And I rarely have a bad dream anymore. I mean, once a year maybe. In the last almost 5 years, I have good dreams now. When I dream, it's a good dream. Before I had very tormenting dreams, evil things coming to me in my dreams, evil things having to happen for me to save myself from those evil creatures or beings in my dreams. Just very demonic, just very tormented, horrible dreams due to the sexual abuse that I suffered. So I suffered neglectful abuse, very neglectful. I suffered sexual abuse, and then I suffered physical abuse as well. So I was abused. I'm not going to say as much as a child could be, because I remember reading the book A Child Called It, and that kid was really abused in different ways. So, but I never want to say, you never want to negate someone else's pain. You know, I'm a very sensitive person. I feel things really deeply, a lot deeper than I would say normal people, but what's normal? But I feel things on an emotional level that most people just don't feel things in that way, and it's a curse and it's a blessing, and God has healed the things about it that's a curse and made it be just a blessing now. And it helps me to feel things passionately and to teach passionately in ways that I wouldn't have been able to had I not felt things so deeply. So I know this was the way I feel things and my emotions was meant to be a blessing, and God meant it that way, and Satan tried to distort or destroy that in a way that made it a curse, but it's not a curse, it's a blessing. So anyways, I don't know how I go off on these tangents, but we're just being real. This is just me talking to you. So my pastor prayed for a few days, and she handed me this curriculum, and then that's what led me on this journey. And it led me on this journey to get free from all these things. And when you lump them together like that, it doesn't seem like a whole lot, but it is a whole lot. It is a lot. It's very much a lot. There's many, many incidents. You know, just my grandfather alone, that abuse alone is enough to send a person to need healing. I mean, that was from the time I was an infant until I was 11. That is repeated abuse for 11 years, for 10 years, let's say. A little over 10 years. Then you count the traumatic times that things happened with mom's boyfriends. Then you count the neglect, which was repeated abuse for my entire childhood. I mean, if you really want to say 18 years, but let's face it, I was an adult by the time I was 9, it seems like, because I had to just take care of everything. My mom just wasn't capable of it. And I now understand she wasn't capable of it because of the abuse she endured. So, you know, God had to take me through each thing separately, and is still taking me through some things. No one's all the way free, you know, no one's all the way free. As long as we're on this earth, there are going to be evil things that are coming in through our soul that could potentially create a stronghold, could potentially create trauma in our lives. And as long as that we are on this earth, there's a potential that there could be something else we need to be set free from. I would say that I am leaps and bounds a different person than I was 5 years ago. and the people who knew me 5 years ago, and the people who know me now, and the people who knew me throughout my adult life, long-term friends, they can attest to this testimony that I'm giving you. I am completely different. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect, but I am completely different. God has, when I think about the goodness of God, and I think about where I was and where I am now, and I know I still have ways to go, but when I just think about the time and the path that I've traveled in the last 5 years, I cannot help but thank him and love him so much. And like I said, in my desperation for freedom from these things, I somehow became desperate for him. And it is literally the most beautiful thing to have ever happened to my life. I'm sure more things are going to come out about my testimony as we go through this class. That's what happens. I'm sure more things are going to come out about my past and things I'm not proud of, but I will always be completely honest, and I have nothing to hide, and I'm not ashamed. I was a very wounded person. I also hurt other people, and I have repented, and I have moved on, and I'm doing my best to be better now because I know better now. So that's where I am. Now, just briefly want to give you guys a little overview of the kinds of things that this class is going to teach. So first of all, the very first thing, everyone's going to need to have a foundation. You're going to have a foundation of salvation. Do you have a foundation of God and his love for you to send his son to die for your soul to be free, and therefore properly be able to filter his spirit through your soul to bring freedom to other children? Do you have that foundation? Do you have the foundation of the love of God in your life? Are you saved? Have you committed your life to living for him? Have you accepted him? Have you accepted what Jesus did for you? I mean, that's the kind of foundation you're going to have. And if you don't have that, find someone who does and talk to them, and they can lead you through it. I don't want to do a blanket prayer here. I don't want to do something that would give you a moment of freedom, but not a lifetime of freedom. I want to give you 10 classes that will give you a lifetime of freedom. So if you don't have that, find someone who does and pray with them. Or ask them questions and have them explain things to you. And I'm just going to leave that alone then with that one. Then the second thing we're going to work through is repentance. Being at the cross daily. And repentance may not mean exactly what you think it means. It may not mean what you've always been told. But we're going to go through that, and we're going to go through that in detail, and I'm going to teach you some things about it that you may have never heard. And then this is how I said I made this class my own. The one thing I added was a whole section on forgiveness. Forgiveness is very important when it comes to healing. Forgiveness is very important when it comes to trauma and negative strongholds. And this is always a difficult part of this process for people, but I'm going to give you some tools and some insights and some revelations about forgiveness that may open your eyes a little and help you understand it a little bit more. The next thing we talk about is having a yoked, weaned, and restful soul. And you're going to learn how to be yoked to Jesus, Y-O-K-E, yoked to Jesus. We're going to talk about that in great detail. We're going to talk about getting set back under his shepherdship, him being your shepherd, him being your leader, him being your everything. And that's how you would be mature and weaned and restful. And then the single most important thing that we're going to learn is abiding. And you may not understand that just by saying that word, but it's a perpetual state of abiding in his presence. It's the thing I talked about deliberate meditation that brings freedom. Deliberate meditation of specific words of God that brings complete freedom to your soul. I'm going to teach you how to do that. And I'm going to go into great detail about how to do this in your life. And then if you're doing those things, you will get a knowledge of the truth, which will bring a level of freedom. You will then enter the free or the free indeed stage of freedom, which free indeed is complete 100% freedom. And that's just a brief outline of the things we're going to go over. Now, if anyone would like to have the workbook that we call a workbook, but it's really a book for taking notes. If anyone would like that, I do have permission to reproduce it as long as I don't charge for it. I would have to charge you shipping. So if you email me, my email is should be pinned somewhere in my YouTube. It is also on the Facebook page and TikTok for Colleen's Cry. It is colleenscry@gmail.com. And I can email it to you and you could print it out as long as you're not charged for it. If you would like me to ship you a copy already printed, I will have to charge you for the shipping, but I will not be charging you for the workbook at all. The book itself you can order on Dutch Sheet's website. And I believe last time I looked, it was $12.99, $12.99, something like that. And I will have that information at the beginning of the next podcast for you, exact amounts. You can also order it on Amazon or other places. Thrift books, if you don't mind a used copy, for much cheaper. And you could have the book to follow along with us. I would recommend that you get at least the book, because everyone needs to hear things several times, and you need to hear it several different ways. So I would like for you to have the book so you can also hear how Dutch Sheets does things. And then also, if you would like another book that goes a little deeper into the things that I'll be teaching, it's a book called Spiritual Man. You can get it on Amazon. I just got a copy for around $20. And again, I will have the exact amounts and exactly where you can order them at the beginning of the next podcast when I give all the information for the class. But just to give you a little heads up, if you want to try to find that and order it ahead of time, you could email me or you can message me, comment, and I will get you that information or even a link. I think that's about all I have for today. I'm probably going to think of 100 things I should have said that I didn't say, but that's okay. I can take a note of them and bring them up at the beginning of the next one and give myself a little grace because I am learning. But I think with that, I'm going to let you guys go for today, and this will end the first podcast of Colleen's Cry, where we are discussing curriculum that I have taught at my church, and curriculum based on the book by Dutch Sheets called Becoming Who You Are, and based on the book The Spiritual Man. I will sign off for now then. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Have a great day.